Just got these SumoSprings to install on my Ford Transit. It's a pretty rough ride. Let's see if these make it better. Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. This company SuperSprings reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in installing their SumoSprings on my 2016 Ford Transit van. And I said absolutely. So here we go. We've got the SumoSprings for the rear and for the front. I've got the instructions printed out and it should be a pretty straightforward, pretty easy install. And we'll get these open up here in just a minute, but just wanted to kind of go over what you're going to need to do this install. The rear is basically replacing your factory bump stop, and on the front it's like a little coil sumo spring. It's like a little isolator, rubber isolator that you press in between the coil spring and the front. Now you are going to need some wheel chocks to do this, a floor jack or something similar, some sockets and a ratchet and a little extension. Also, you're going to need a torque wrench. Now you also want to make sure to park this on level ground. My driveway is sloped, and so I decided to do this out on the street, just a little bit safer when I'm jacking up the van and supporting that. Now my van is lifted. I've got the van compass lift on here, and you can see we've got bigger tires than stock as well. These are 265/75/16s. Now even though this is lifted and the tires are bigger, I still think I can get to those coil springs from the front and do the back bump stops as well without taking off the wheels. But it is a good idea to use jack stands because we are lifting the vehicle. So let's get to it. I'm going to start with the front. Now I have the parking brake on. I just want to make sure that we do chock the wheels though. I'm just going to do front and back to make sure this doesn't roll on me. All right, we've got the wheels off the ground and we're supported with the jack and jack stands. Let's start with the driver's side and put that one in. Let's just get these opened up. Well, that's pretty cool. Comes with stickers. And here's what they look like. Now we're just wiping these coils off with a damp rag and some soapy water here. That not only cleans it, but soapy water just kind of helps the install here. Now, if you look at the profile of these Coil Sumo Springs, you can see that there is a deeper groove on one side. The deeper groove goes on the bottom. All right, and I'm just gonna put some extra soapy water on that spring. Now here the instructions say just to wrap it around the spring, kind of like a collar. And then once it's partway around, start with the bottom and then press the top in. Yeah, that's working. Just kind of snaking this around. All right, well that looks pretty good to me right where it's sitting. Now I think these are gonna work just fine set up like this. Now I don't have the opening on the outside, which is what the instructions say. Now I'm gonna double check with SumoSprings that this is okay to run it like this with the gap on the inside rather than the outside. The only reason I did it like this is because of the lift that I have installed. If you can see maybe way up there at the top, that little green spacer changes the angle and pushes this coil closer to the body. And because of that, that would rub unless I leave the gap on the inside. But it looks like this is gonna work just fine. Let's go do the other side now. You can see right here on the side, once you have it started, you can kind of just push it through, pressing it in as you go. But once you start the one end, it's pretty easy. And then just follow it around until it all pops into place like that. And that's what it looks like installed, fully seated all the way around. And again, I'm leaving the gap on the inside on my van only because of those coil spacers at the top and the fact that this is closer to the frame or the body of the van. I think this is gonna work great. Pull out our jack stands and just go ahead and lower it. Now that does look like it's a little bit taller to me after I've set it back down, but of course we'll do a test drive first and just kind of let that settle in before I take the final before and after measurements, or the final after measurements. I've already done the before measurements. Now the Coil Sumo Spring should preferably be in the middle, and we're pretty close to the middle here. I've just got one spring below and looks like just one above. Now they also do say if you have more than an inch of overlap, we don't have that overlap at all, so I don't have to worry about cutting this. It also says you really shouldn't need any tools to install this, which I did not, but it says if you do need to, you can use a blunt screwdriver or something to pry that to get started. But this looks really good. It's really in there solid, and like I said, I think it did add a little bit of height here, and so that might actually help us with our little rubbing issue that we have on the front. But let's go ahead and do the back, and then we'll take this for a test drive and see how it does. I didn't mention it, but the part number is CSS-1195 for the Coil Sumo Springs, the one we put on the front just now. And then the part number here for the rear for our van, we got the SSR-121-40. This spring here does add 1,000 pounds of additional capacity. There is a 121-47. I think it adds even more weight capacity. Let's go ahead and open this one up. It comes with the printed installation instructions. I thought I needed to print them out, so that's pretty cool. You don't have to waste your paper or ink, but this tells us exactly what we need to do. This one is a little bit different. This comes with a few different spacers and different length bolts to fit a variety of vehicle configurations. After taking the measurement, determine which combination of spacers will combine for a total height that is 1/2 inch to 1 inch less than the measurement between the frame and axle. The 4-inch SumoSpring plate, item B, must always be used directly on top of the SumoSpring. So let's go take a measurement, and then we will find out what we need to do based on that measurement, which spacer we need to use. But here again, we've got some nice stickers and 2 different length bolts, and we also have some Loctite, which is important on this install. And here is the main SumoSpring. Here's the 2 different spacers, looks like, and then that is the main plate that we need to use. We'll find out if we need to use this one or both of them combined. Now my setup is going to be different than some of yours because I have these little bump stop extensions as a part of my lift kit from Van Compass. Now I'm still going to take the measurement up to the bottom of that bump stop extension, and right now we're just over 5 inches, maybe closer to 5 1/4. All right, so the SumoSpring is just a hair over 5 inches. And like I mentioned, they come with an inch spacer and another 1/2 inch spacer. And then you also have this 4-inch metal plate that you need to use. So that's all I'm going to do is just the SumoSpring with the metal plate, just a hair over 5 1/4. So this, I anticipate this will be barely touching. If I'm able to leave that, I will. If not, now that I remember, this might have had a longer bolt already. So I'm gonna have to see what kind of bolt I have with the kit, or if that's gonna work, or I may need to remove this altogether and replace it with the longer bolt with the SumoSprings. But let's start just by pulling this one and just twist it out. Just kind of pops right out like that. Yeah, we do have a longer bolt here installed because of this spacer that I had already put on. So let's pull this out, and that's going to take off this spacer too, and then we'll come up with the configuration and the right amount of spacing, and maybe we will be able to figure out a way to get that 1/2 inch or 1 inch of clearance off the axle. There we go. Now it doesn't look like this spacer, by the time I put this plate on here, and if I were to use this original lift spacer that I had, you can see we don't have threads coming out the bottom. So I'm gonna toss this one here that I used to have. All right, so right now, without that lift spacer that I had in there, it's right about 7 inches. So if I do the SumoSpring with both spacers, it looks like we're going to be a lot closer to that. Yeah, see right there, we're at 6 3/4, and I like that. So I'm gonna install it just like this. Now, in order to get my socket in there, I'm gonna have to raise the vehicle and let the axle droop. So let's do that so that we can fit that in and install it. Now, I only need to lift this up a little bit. So we're resting safely on these jack stands and the jack here on the tow hitch. I didn't need much, just needed that to go up just a little bit so that I could fit that in with a ratchet, and I think we're good now. Just make sure you get some thread locker on the bolt there. And then I'm just using an extension here in a 17mm socket, and we can just line this up now that we've got room for it. And now we do need to torque this to 20 foot-pounds. All right, that's installed. Now let's go to the other side. There's just a side-by-side comparison of the two. This is the stock bump stop on the Transit, and this is the SumoSpring that we're putting in. All right, same thing with the passenger side. Just pull this bump stop out. Let's get that thread lock on the bolt here. All right, and just put this one into place with all the spacers on it. All right, you can see we still have between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch between that SumoSpring and the little axle mount. So we should be good. Let's go take this for a test drive and see how it does. All right, now since we do have the space above the axle in the back, I don't anticipate a huge difference in the back unless we were loaded down. And I did a quick little test drive before, just so I could do some comparison here. Now let's just go down and take a corner here as well and see how this does. I'm gonna say that that is less roll, less body roll when turning on this now. Feels smooth over the bumps and everything. Just hit a few dips here just to test this out. Not making any noise, which is great. Let's do a nice tight U-turn here and see how that works. Well, I can tell you one thing, the front did not rub. Usually my tires would rub doing a tight turn like that, and they did not rub. So just the front alone, I think, has solved that problem. I'm sure this will make a big difference when we're loaded up as well, but for right now, I'm very pleased with this. I love the fact that these are maintenance free. Unlike airbags, you know, sometimes you'll get a leak and sometimes they just don't last very long. Now, as far as overall time, this took me really about, I would say the front took me about 15 or 20 minutes and the back probably 25, 30 minutes. Total time was less than an hour for front and back. Now here I am just measuring the ride height of each wheel before and after. And I'm just gonna put all of the measurements up here on the screen for you. You can see that in the front, we did have an increase of about 1/4 inch. And in the back, it was essentially unchanged just due to probably how the van was sitting on the driveway. We got a little bit of a different measurement there, but because those bump stops are not touching, I didn't really anticipate any change in the back. Now here's just a quick update for you. I've had these installed for about a week and been driving the van around quite a bit and definitely noticed a difference. My wife's also driven it and she noticed the difference. She said it's smoother over the bumps and it is handling even better around turns. The biggest improvement for me was actually unexpected. We used to rub a little bit on the inside of the front wheels when taking a sharp U-turn or a tight turn, even when turning over a bump. So far, that hasn't happened since I've got these SumoSprings installed, so I'm really happy with that improvement. But the overall ride has definitely improved. We took this to the beach this weekend and had it loaded up with lots of kids and surfboards and definitely helped out. It does handle better. It's turning better. It feels like the van is not rolling quite so much when taking those turns, and any bump or anything like that, it's just not as harsh as it was. So very, very happy with that improvement. Now remember, because I had the lift and those lift blocks in the back, you know, that bump stop extension, even though we took that out, essentially we're just putting a taller, longer bump stop. You can see that the spacing between the old bump stop and the perch where it hit was a little bit greater than what it is now. But overall, when we do hit, we have a little bit more cushion, a little bit more spring to take up that shock or that jolt. And so it definitely is riding better. But I'm very happy with this install and how it went with my van. I would absolutely recommend SumoSprings if you have a transit van as well. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description where you can pick up these exact same SumoSprings along with some of those other tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching and good luck.